On Friday, March 29, 1929, Thomas Lamont was supposed to be resting in the hills outside Florence. He had left Paris after weeks of tense negotiations over German reparations. A villa, a week with his family, a little distance from New York, that was the idea. Then the telegrams arrived. Across the Atlantic, a secret communications deal was leaking into the newspapers. It involved RCA, Western Union, ITT, and some of the most powerful men in American finance. To Lamont, it was not merely a merger. It was a chance to build the future and put the House of Morgan at the center of it. But the same stock that made the deal glamorous was already moving beyond anyone's control. RCA was not trading like an ordinary company. It was trading like a national dream. The market had just survived the March panic. The lesson might have been caution. Instead, in the days that followed, Wall Street found new men, new stories, and new machines for selling confidence. Radio was perfect for 1929 because it felt impossible to doubt. Millions of Americans were bringing sets into their homes. Voices, music, news, sermons, comedy, and presidential speeches traveled through the air as if the country had acquired a new nervous system. Radio made the future intimate. You could put it in the parlor. You could gather around it at night. You could hear the modern world entering the room. RCA sat at the center of that imagination. Investors called the stock radio, as if the company and the invention were the same thing. It promised patents, broadcasting, advertising, international cables, and even technologies that were not yet fully commercial. That is what made it dangerous. A factory could be inspected. A balance sheet could be questioned. But the future was harder to price and easier to sell. It did not have to arrive all at once. It could be suggested by a shop window, a new aerial on a roof, a family leaning toward a speaker, or a newspaper paragraph about the next great combination. The public was not irrational to be fascinated. Radio really was changing daily life. The danger was that a real invention could be turned into a financial costume. Once a stock became a symbol, every rumor about the future could become an argument to buy. After the March rescue, buyers were not simply buying earnings. They were buying the feeling that progress itself had a ticker symbol. Michael Meehan understood that feeling better than almost anyone. On the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, he was the official specialist in RCA. His post was number 12, and visitors in the gallery knew to look for him there because radio was the stock everyone wanted to see. The specialist's public role was order. Match buyers and sellers. Keep the market liquid. Make trading look controlled. Meehan's private role was more profitable. In March, he circulated a confidential pool plan to favored customers and allied brokers. The idea was not subtle. With enough money behind him, Meehan believed he could push RCA upward, make the tape look alive, and draw the public into the move. The pool gathered millions of dollars. William Durant joined. Walter Chrysler joined. Money came through personal accounts, brokerage accounts, and in some cases wives' names. Then the show began. Pool members bought and sold in coordination. They kept themselves apart on the floor. They made activity look like demand. Financial columns and market talk did the rest. To the public, RCA seemed to be rising because the future had arrived. Behind the motion was a group of men arranging the appearance of motion. When the pool sold into the public excitement, the insiders made fortunes. Nothing important about radio had changed that week. The story had changed. And in 1929, a story could move money faster than evidence. The most disturbing part was how ordinary it could look. A pool was not a masked robbery. It used brokerage accounts, exchange procedure, press chatter, and the public's own excitement. It took the visible forms of capitalism and filled them with a private script. Carter Glass looked at the same market and saw something uglier. Glass was not a simple hero. He was a segregationist and a defender of Jim Crow. But on the banking system, he was one of the most knowledgeable men in Washington, and he believed Wall Street was bending the Federal Reserve toward private speculation. After Charles Mitchell's rescue, Glass watched stocks rise again and grew furious. Mitchell had used National City's power to support the call loan market at the very moment the Federal Reserve was trying to restrain speculative credit. To Wall Street, Mitchell had saved the market. To Glass, he had defied the public purpose of the banking system. Glass was often ill. He did not need a crowded Senate floor to fight. He used letters. Dictated letters. Sharp letters. Letters from hospital rooms and hotels. He wanted Mitchell disciplined because the issue was no longer just whether stocks went up. The issue was who governed credit when speculation became too large to offend. That is why Glass matters here. His warning did not stop the boom, and his own politics were morally stained. But he saw a structural danger clearly. When a market becomes dependent on rescue, every attempt to discipline it can be made to look like the real threat. William C. Durant decided to take the argument directly to the president. He traveled quietly from New York to Washington. Only his wife knew the purpose. He avoided the usual display, arrived at the Carlton Hotel near the White House, and prepared his case. Durant had built and lost empires before. He understood promotion, confidence, and the emotional weather of business. In his mind, the Federal Reserve was not protecting the country by tightening credit. It was threatening prosperity itself. His argument was built for Herbert Hoover. Durant brought the language of evidence, a poll of company executives, the claim that business leaders did not see their stocks as overpriced, the warning that restraint would damage the whole economy. At night, he managed to get into the White House and put the case before Hoover. Hoover listened, but he was not persuaded. He suspected prices would eventually come down to earth without the president becoming the market's visible guardian. Durant left the meeting with the burden placed where he wanted it. If disaster came, he had warned the president. It was salesmanship in its most serious form. Durant was not merely talking up a stock. He was trying to define the boundary between speculation and prosperity. If he could make those two things sound inseparable, then restraint could be painted as sabotage. John J. Raskob sold confidence with a smoother hand. He was rich, famous, restless, and everywhere: DuPont, General Motors, Democratic politics, Catholic organizations, stock pools, newspaper attention, private dinners, public forecasts. He had climbed from stenographer to one of the most powerful business figures in America, and he treated organization as a kind of magic. Raskob had profited from the RCA pool. He was comfortable with debt in a country that had once treated debt as shame. He believed capital could organize almost anything: companies, parties, elections, headlines, even public feeling. In April, he was preparing a dinner at the Carlton House for Democratic leaders. Officially, it was about party debt and political strategy after Al Smith's defeat. Beneath that was something larger. Raskob wanted to apply the methods of finance to politics: permanent fundraising, professional headquarters, loyal networks, pressure applied all year round. This mattered because the boom was no longer just a market phenomenon. Its techniques were migrating. Pools, publicity, leverage, social obligation, and moneyed confidence were becoming a broader language of power. The same habits that made a market pool work could make a political network work. Find the right people. Gather commitments. Keep the public message simple. Make hesitation feel provincial and confidence feel modern. Raskob had not invented that language, but he spoke it fluently. When Durant could not move Hoover privately, he tried the public. On Sunday night, April 14th, he went to Steinway Hall, where WAC had a broadcast studio high above 57th Street. He had bought 15 minutes of airtime. The audience was not a brokerage office or a Senate committee. It was the radio public. Durant told listeners that the country was in a struggle between business and the Federal Reserve. He blamed the March scare on official restraint. He praised Mitchell. He argued that stock ownership had spread through the country and that securities credit was tied to prosperity itself. In other words, he did what the men of the boom kept doing. He made speculation sound like citizenship. Radio gave that argument a new intimacy. A banker could publish a statement. A senator could write a letter. A newspaper could frame the dispute in columns. But a voice in the home was different. It did not feel like Wall Street shouting from a distance. It felt like reassurance arriving through the furniture. Critics in Washington heard a self-interested speculator protecting his book. Many listeners heard something easier to live with, a businessman saying the danger came not from too much confidence, but from those trying to restrain it. That was the achievement of spring 1929. The market had revealed its fragility, and yet professionals found ways to make buying feel rational again. Lamont had the future. Meehan had the pool. Raskob had the method. Durant had the microphone. The rescue did not end the boom. It taught the boom how to sell itself.